Hi everybody, good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar on 10 plus tips for Excel and Word on how to make you a power user. Before we get started, just want to go through some very quick housekeeping on how we're going to work today. So questions are welcomed. You'll see on the right hand side of the screen, you should have a chat box there. Feel free to pop in any kind of questions or chat on there. Probably best if you actually have it set to center everybody, because then I tend to see it. Otherwise, if it's set to center admin, I don't always spot it come up. So certainly send it to everybody, pop any questions in there. Happy to answer those as we come to the end of the presentation. If you're watching this on a replay, there's still a chat box on the side. You can pop in a question there, drop that in, and I'll come back to you on email once I receive that. We'll probably be about 30 minutes today, may even be a little bit quicker. This is actually probably rattle through these pretty quickly. I'm going to run through some slides showing you a few tips and tricks on Excel and on Word, and then also going to jump into Excel specifically and kind of give you a live demo on some of these tips, because actually it's a lot easier to show you with a spreadsheet rather than trying to do screenshots and talk through it. If you need to jump off and duck away, there'll be a replay link sent out 24 hours later, so you'll receive that around about 1 o'clock tomorrow in your email. So if you do need to go, feel free, you can pick up the replay tomorrow. So for those who are attending the webinar who are new to OneFix, briefly about us, we are specialists in providing IT support, fully managed for businesses. We have a typical IT customer base of between 10 and 150 staff. Average client size for us is around about 30 to 35 staff. We normally manage the entire IT infrastructure, which includes the supply of all the equipment, running the help desk and providing tech support. However, we can also work with internal IT teams to add specialist skills which may not exist within the business. We work to save our clients money by reducing unexpected downtime, helping to manage IT budgets and planning, and keeping all of the infrastructure secure. And for those who don't know me, I'm down in the bottom corner at the moment. I'm Craig Atkins. I'm the Managing Director of OneFix. If you're a Twitter user, you can follow me on Twitter at OneFix. Alternatively, get linked up with me on LinkedIn. I quite often put up there IT tips and articles and information, so please do find me on LinkedIn and get connected. It'd be great to converse with you on there. Okay, so jumping straight into our subject today, which is the Word and Excel tips and tricks. I'll be straight up front with you. There's a lot more Excel tips and tricks in here than there are for Microsoft Word, just because there's so much more you can do with Excel. We are scratching the surface here, really. So again, I'd be happy to, welcome more kind of direct questions about specific functions, and I can give you some, send you some private information on how you do certain things if there's things that you need to know. But I've picked out some things here that I think are going to be useful for most people. So one really basic thing, but actually I didn't actually realize this existed for quite a long time, and I was struggling with Excel with text wrapping. So obviously, if you've used Excel at all, you'll know when you type into a cell, it has a habit of, wrapping out of the existing cell. If there's nothing else next to it, you can see all of the text. If there's a cell next to it, it flows behind that cell. And I knew you could do wrapping, and I used to right-click the cell and go to format and change the format. But actually, there is a button on the toolbar to do just this. So there is a wrap text button. So you'll see there, I've highlighted it on the screen. It's under the it's actually on the home page. So where you've got all your formatting, you've got alignment. Next to that is wrap text. So click on the cell with the text that you need to wrap. Hit wrap text, and you'll see it will expand the cell and it will wrap the text. So super simple, super easy. But if you're not currently using that method of doing it, then it might be a time saver for you. Now, this is one that is handy if you're processing data. So if you happen to end up with, let's say, a data sheet of names that you need to then bring into, I don't know, let's say you need to export them into a contact management system or an email system. Quite often you actually want to take the full name and you want to make it into first name and surname. So Excel actually has a feature called text to columns, and this will allow you to do just this. The way you do it is you highlight the column of data where you want to break out the text into multiple columns, and you hit the text to columns button, and it will bring up this wizard that you can see on the screen. Essentially, you need to choose how the text is delimited. Delimited means basically how is it split. So you can use this function to break apart lots of different things, but here we're going to break apart a full name to a first name and surname. Because we know the first name and surname are split by a space, we can actually choose that the delimiter is a space. And you'll see from the screenshot there that in the preview window it's actually broken out a first name and a surname into 2 columns. What you would do then, press the next button, and it will expand that data out into the second column. But you need to make sure you have a spare column there. So make sure that you've actually got a column next to that full name column, because when you press next, it will actually overwrite the data. And I'll show you this one in a live demo in a minute. So I'll show you how you find this one and where you do it. But so it's a great way of breaking out surnames from a full name, and you can break those things into 2. You can break out something with multiple delimiters. So if you have a particular column in Excel that's say got I don't know, something separated by lots of commas, you could use comma, or you can use the option on there to say other, and you can actually pick a character. So again, if you've imported some data from somewhere and say it's hyphenated and it's separated by hyphens and you want to break that out into multiple columns, simply highlight the column, choose the delimiter, click other, type in there the character that it is, press next, and it will break that out into multiple columns. So it's really powerful and it's really useful, and you can use it in all sorts of ways. You can actually be quite clever with it to break out data into different ways. One thing that's quite useful is there's a function in Excel called paste special. So paste special allows you to do mass calculations on a field. So what you can do with paste special is the example I've given here. If we've got a whole load of figures, and I've put 6 or 7 here, but if you could have an entire page full of data that you need to use it on, and this is where it becomes very powerful because it's quick. If you need to add VAT to those figures as an example, the way that I would add VAT to those figures is I would multiply it by 1.2, because that essentially adds 20%. So what we would do is we find a spare cell in Excel, so anywhere where we haven't got any data, and we type in there 1.2, because that's what we want to multiply all those figures by. And then we copy that cell. So we use Control-C or right-click copy, put that cell into the clipboard. Then you would highlight your list of numbers. So you can use an entire column as well. So you highlight those, and then right-click on them, and you'll have a paste option just below the regular paste stuff that says paste special. If you click on paste special, you will see a screen like what you're seeing on screen now. And there's an operation section. And in there at the moment, it will normally say none. If you select multiply and press OK, it will multiply all those figures that you've highlighted with the initial figure that you copied to the clipboard. So you can highlight a huge amount of stuff and apply a multiplication. You can apply a division. You can apply subtraction or an addition. So a really, really good way of splatting down a whole load of data. So I've used adding VAT as an example, but you could use it, for example, as a price rise. If you have a spreadsheet absolutely full of data and you need to do a price rise on that, again, put the price rise into a cell, copy it, select the cells that you want to do the price rise to, paste special, and choose multiply or add or whatever you're doing with it. So really quick data manipulation. Another one here, which has been in Excel for donkey's years, but I very rarely see people use it. And I'll show you a live demo in a minute as to why this is quite useful. But you can bring in data from the web into Excel. You can bring in any data, but it doesn't always handle it very well. But if you have data on a website that kind of looks like it's formatted, so it looks like it's tabulated, or it looks like it's in kind of charts or rows, you can bring that straight into Excel to work with. If you've ever tried this before without using the this data from web option, if you've done it by copy and paste, quite often you find you copy things from a website and you paste them into Excel, and it just doesn't format very well, and it might give you lots and lots of rows of the data rather than bring it out into a table. So if you click on the data tab at the top of Excel, choose from web, you'll get this this screen appear, which is a really basic box. I wouldn't use the advanced function. It doesn't add anything of value particularly for what you're going to need to do. In the URL, you paste in there the actual website that you want to grab the data from. So the best way to do that is have a web browser open, find the data, go up to the top bar, copy and paste. So you put that in, press OK, and it will bring you a data navigator. What it's done, and it's probably difficult to see in this example, but it's broken out the data from the page into lots of different data tables. So we can choose the one that we want to bring in, and we can press load at the bottom, and it then brings that formatted data into Excel. So it actually brings it in. It's slightly missed the trick here because it actually hasn't brought in our headings from the columns, but that's fine. That's easy to sort, but you can see it's already brought in the data, and it's given us sorted lists. So we can bring data in from websites and actually use that to manipulate. Once we've got the data in, you'll have a pane that will appear on the right-hand side called Queries and Connections, and that will show you within the spreadsheet essentially what your data queries are. So for this example here, it's showing us that we've loaded some data called Ladies Afternoon Division 1, and there's 11 rows of data. And you can refresh that from that screen there. So there is actually an icon on the right-hand side, looks like a little page with a set of arrows. I've highlighted it here with a kind of a circle. You hit that, that will pull in a data refresh. So that will update the data that you've got on the website. And if you hover over it, you get the pop-out that you can also see on the screen that shows you, again, the data you've got, when it was last refreshed, that it's been loaded okay, where it's come from. So you can start to pull in data from things like supplier sites. So I've seen this commonly used in the past. People used to use it to pull in, say, live stocks and shares data and things like that. But if you have information, say you have pricing that a supplier publishes on a website and you want to pull it into Excel, you can do that from the load data section. And again, I'll give you a screenshot, kind of a live demo in a minute to show you that workflow, because it's a lot easier to demo it in real life. But so let's do that now. I will share my screen very quickly. Okay. Right, so some of the other things I want to show you, I'm going to show you live because they're a lot easier, but I will quickly show you that data loading. So let me just close this query off quickly. So I'm going to open up a new sheet for this. When you do load data from web, which is under data from web, it will actually always load it into a new worksheet anyway, but just because I don't want to lose what I've got here, I'm going to put a new sheet in just in case something goes wrong, which shouldn't do. So I'm going to go data, and I'm going to go from web. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring over into that window the data that I'm using, so you can see why I've chosen it, because this is the website. This is actually some data that pulls out from a particular web page here. There's a whole list you can see here of essentially different people and different information. So this is a pretty basic web page as an example, but it's already here in a list, so you can really nicely bring that in. So I'm going to copy this into my clipboard. I'm going to paste the URL in and press OK. Excel has a little think, and this is where we get this data navigator. So as you saw from the web page, if I just bring it up again very quickly, on the web page here, we've got a heading of team captains. We have a Ladies Afternoon Division 1, Division 2, etc. And you can see Excel's worked that out, and it's worked out that we've already got these areas. So it's given us the Division 1. I can click on it and we can see the information, and I can go Division 2, we can get the information. If I choose to select multiple items here, I could bring in a bunch of these together, but actually let's say I'm going to bring in Men's Evening League Division 1 as an example, and I'm just going to press load. And Excel will think about it, and it will rumble along, and there we go, and it's brought that data in. And I can do all the normal things I could do with this data. So I could actually chop down here, and I could choose to, just select one lot. And so it's auto filtered, ready to go. It's just really, really easy. So I think that's a really, really kind of cool feature. And as I say, we can refresh here. So if we have data that is regularly updating, we can go onto here, we can click refresh, it will whirl away and it will refresh itself. You can also set the data to automatically refresh on load. If you go onto the data source, right click properties, there's some options here. So background refresh means that it doesn't lock out Excel when you do the refresh. So that's selected as standard now. So when you do your refresh, it won't freeze Excel up for you. But you can actually tick a box here. You can actually have it automatically refresh in the background. So again, if you have a spreadsheet that's pulling data that's frequently changing, you can have it automatically refresh. You may want to select that it refreshes when you open the file. And also whether it refreshes when you hit refresh all, which is tucked away, I think from memory, is under the data tab here. Yep, there's a refresh all button that will refresh all the data in the workbook. So if you have lots and lots of these kind of web links or links to other spreadsheets, you can use that to refresh all the data. So that was the web side of things. Just delete that sheet now because we don't need it. And I'll delete my blank one that I created. And what I'm going to show you here is a few other cool things you can do. So one of the nice things you can do with Excel is if you highlight a whole column of information or a whole selection of information. Here we've got some random heights of people. These are people, date of birth, age, height. If I highlight these here, you get this kind of little lightning box at the bottom. If you click on that, you will get this pop out at the bottom. I can't remember what they actually call this. It's got a name. I think it's something like quick parts, but essentially it will give you the option to automatically put some formatting in, and it uses a bit of I guess AI or a bit of logic to work out what it thinks you want to do. So if we hover over icon set, what you can see it's done here is it's put in fact, let me just zoom this a bit as well so it makes it even clearer. So let's highlight this here again. Icon set. What it's done here is it's worked out an average. So it's taken an average, it's put the green arrow for people who are above the average height of our data set, it's put the yellow arrow for people who are the average height or the standard height, and it's put the red arrow for the people that are below it. You can choose greater, that will take I think that's greater than the average. Top 10%, that's pretty self-explanatory. We've obviously only got 20 records here, so it's only going to highlight 2. Data bars, so it will automatically put data bars behind the figures, with the top figure being the top end. It doesn't take the lowest figure as the bottom end. What it's doing here is it's deciding that in its logic that 0 would be the lowest height, which I guess it would. So it's showing you here a staggered bar basically of the sizes. You can also drop down here and go to totals. So again, you may have been used in the past. There's a button for kind of auto summarize to give you a sum at the bottom. Well, from here, if you highlight and hit that button, go to totals, you can stick in a sum of the height. Arguably not that useful. Average probably is. So you can see the figure is changing in real time. I'm not clicking anything, I'm just mousing over and it's changing what it's showing me. So count will show me how many records I've got. Average will be the average of the numbers. Percentage total, again, in this instance, it's not useful. You could do that if you were highlighting selected cells. That one I think is a running total. So again, if you've got sets of numbers and you're stopping and you're starting a next set, you can do a running total. And you can flick through. There's a whole bunch of different options here that you can choose, and some of these will put alongside. So the ones you might just see there's a little right arrow. These ones that show in yellow, they will put something alongside. So they'll create a new set of sums or averages or counts. Again, here, the reason why this is showing us exactly the same thing and it's showing us a count of 1 is because it would be summing here across the columns. So if we had 2 or 3 columns highlighted with figures and we went to sum, then it would create a sum across. But percentage total, that is useful here. It would give you an idea if you were using figures here to make up a total, you can see what percentage of the total they make up. So there's some useful stuff there. And you can also throw in charts. Again, a chart of one particular figure is not particularly useful, but you can see this is just Excel giving you a really quick function to actually add some of these things in. So if you were to highlight multiple fields and then pull this, it will show you some different information. Similarly, I don't know what's going to happen if we try it on date of birth. There we go. So it's used its intelligence as well. So it's given us last week. Well, that's not particularly useful. It's not going to highlight anything there. But again, it's going to use some intelligence there to try and work out what you might want to do. So it's a really useful thing. You can just pull through some information, try it out, click on that, see what it gives you. But I think certainly some of the functions there to give you kind of the instant conditional formatting is really useful. Talking about conditional formatting, we can use conditional formatting. So we can go to find where it is. Let's just check. I can never find it. It is here. So under the Home tab, we have conditional formatting. So a bit like what Excel was doing there with the up arrows, the down arrows, conditional formatting will let you create rules to highlight cells for certain reasons. Now you can create your own rules and you can get quite complicated with it, and you can do some quite cool stuff with it if you understand Excel rules and things like that. But actually here we can do some instant kind of created rules here. So at the top you can see there's highlight cells rules. So these are really useful for finding either figures that are greater than something, less than something, between, equal, cells that contain a certain text. So you might want a cell that contains yes or good, and you can have that go green. top and bottom rules. So you want to take the top 10, top 10%, bottom 10, bottom 10%, above average, below average. So data bars, which is what we saw previously. And again, if you hover over some of these, they'll give you some previews, but they have set colors. So you can choose these or solid fills, color scales. And again, these are quite nice. These are on a gradient scale. So again, when you have data like this and you want to visualize it, a color scale will give you an idea from red to yellow to green, red being the highest, green being the lowest. And again, the icon sets like we saw previously, you can change the types of icons it shows you. 4 arrows, you can use shapes. So you can do some really cool stuff with this in terms of pulling in information off of what you've got without really having to write any code or do anything special. Now, what I also want to show you is a pivot table. Pivot tables are something that people tend to shy away from. They find them quite scary. They are not as scary as they first appear. So if I'm going to highlight all of this information here, and I'm going to go data, and let me find a pivot table. Oh, no, it's going to be under insert, sorry, insert pivot table. So we do insert pivot table. It's going to ask us what range of data we've got. So we want to select everything that we've got, including our header column. And we're going to put it into a new worksheet because it's just going to make life easier. You could put it into your existing worksheet, but I find with pivot tables, they're easier to work on in a brand new sheet. And what a pivot table is basically a way of building up a table or a chart of information that you change, and you can pivot, so you can move things around and change the information. So here, for example, on our pivot table, it's asking us on the right-hand side what we want to include. So in this, I'm going to include, let's include their age and their height. And at the moment, that's not giving us much useful information because it's just brought in the sum of the age and the sum of the height. That's what it's put down in the values here. What we might actually want to do is where we can pivot is we can move things around. So we've got a column of the values, and we've got that one there. So I move the height into the rows. So, and then we're going to change that to field settings. Oops. We should be able to choose on here to, right, hang on, let me start again. I think I've messed my demo up. Let's do it this way. What I want to do is get you a, basically an example that we can do so we can pull together and move the data around. Let's try again. There we go, let's do date of birth and height. That's what I wanted. Right, so what we've got here now, again, we don't really want a sum of the height because we've got where we've put date of birth in as a row, it's giving us options on years, so it's actually broken down to automatically pull the years in. So sum of people's height over years isn't very useful. So if we change the field settings here, we go to average, we can see what the average height was for the year. We can expand open into these as well. And it's now automatically brought in the fact that these are quarters. You could change the type of data it's bringing in. But what you can do as well is that if you've got more data, and this isn't really the best data set to show you a demo here, but you can start to drag these things around. So you can take your data and you can move that into a column. And the value then might be the age of the people. So now we've got an age distribution. So we can see that in 1958, for someone who was 1.48 meters, they were 62 years old. Not particularly useful because we can work that out from the year. But you can see you can start to drag things around, and the idea with the pivot table is you just literally start to drag some of these things about, you change the order of it, and it will change the way your table works. So the best way to work with a pivot table is literally splat the data in, start dragging these things around between the fields of rows, columns. The values will typically, you'll normally keep that the same. That would normally be what you actually want to report on. And likewise, you can spin a chart off of this. So you have pivot chart here. That would chart the data that you're putting in, and the chart will change as you drag things around. And again, with a pivot chart, this isn't, again, necessarily the best data, but you can see here where it's got the information. What you can do is actually drag it on the chart. So if you wanted to change the count of the years and the height, you can, oops, you should be able to drag them about. It's not going to let me do it. Okay, so we have to do it from here, but you can move these things around, and you see the chart updates, the table updates. So pivot tables are all dependent on the type of data you're using, but you can actually manipulate it really quickly. So I would recommend you just literally play with it, highlight the data you want, drop it in as a pivot table, play with it. It lets you mess around and sample that data how you want. Very quickly, I'm going to show you that text to columns that we showed you a bit earlier on, just to show you how that works as an actual workflow. So I'm going to pop in another column here, because as I say, we need a second column to be able to expand the text out to. So I'm going to insert one here. We can give it a heading in a bit, but we're going to highlight the data we've got here. And we're going to go to the, from memory, it was the data column. Yes, data, text to columns. So on the data page, text to columns, we get the wizard pop up. It'll normally start with delimited. If you've got fixed width data, so you want to take the last 8 characters or something like that, you can choose fixed width, but we're going to go with delimited. We're going to choose space. And you can see if I unselect space, this preview shows me I've only got 1 column of data. Once I select space, I've now got 2. And if you have treat consecutive delimiters as 1, that means if your data has 2 or 3 spaces between the first name and the surname because of typing errors, it will still treat it as just 1 and it will still break out. And we press next. And we're going to press finish. We can leave Excel to say general on these column types. Sometimes if you're working with numbers, you might want to actually tell Excel that it's a date or a number or a text, because otherwise it sometimes takes a guess and it picks the wrong column type. But general as a whole should work. Text will guarantee that it knows it's text, so we can do that. And we press finish. And there we go. We've now broken out first name and surname is 2 columns. So that was those bits there on terms of the quick highlight when you grab the data and you can pull in the options. We had conditional formatting and we had pivot tables. I'm going to quickly jump back to the presentation and resume the slideshow. Okay, so quickly now into Word tips and tricks. So we haven't got too many of these. The biggest tip I can give anybody with Word, depending on what they're doing and what they're typing and what they're working on, is to format your documents properly. So you'll notice within Word you have the style section and you have normal and you have headings 1, 2. Once you put in heading 2, you'll have heading 3 appear as a style as well, title, subtitle, etc. If you use these, the reason to use these rather than just highlighting some text and, I don't know, making it bigger or making it bold to make a heading, is because when you use these formats, you can start to drop in some automatic functions. So you can drop in, the most useful one I find if you're doing a long document is the table of contents. So to do that, there is stupidly, it's not under insert, which is where I would have thought you would want to go to insert table of contents. It's under references. Don't know why, but under references, there's a button that says table of contents. If you click that, you'll see from the screenshot that I've put on screen, it drops down with a couple of options. So it has an automatic table 1, automatic table 2, or manual table. Manual table, well, if you want to type up your entire table of contents, go for manual table. But otherwise, if you've used those formatting headers properly, you can drop in an automatic one. So drop in automatic table 1 or table 2. The only difference between them, I believe, is that automatic table 1 says contents and automatic table 2 says table of contents. I don't think I've found any differences other than that. But it will drop it in and it will create you an automatic table of contents, which is really useful. And as you add things to that, you can refresh the table. Again, I'll flick over really quickly in a minute with a screen share to Word, and I'll show you this in real life because it's important to bear in mind that this automatic table of contents, although it's automatic, it does not refresh when you add new things. So when you go in and you make tweaks and updates to your documents, you need to go and refresh the table of contents before you save it. Otherwise, it will end up with, when it's really broken, you'll end up, instead of having page numbers, it will say #ref or #edref, and it will just look a bit silly when you save it. So another tip, and this ties in with the whole table of contents thing, is that Word, and this has been in Office since about 2007, it's got a function in there to create your PDF documents. Not everybody knows this exists. Some people will print to Qt PDF or to Adobe Distiller or whatever, but there is an export straight in Word to PDF. Just simply click the File menu, choose Export, and then click that Create PDF /XPS button. XPS is a Microsoft document format that really hasn't gained much traction, in all honesty. PDF is really the standard nowadays. Click on that button and that will create you your PDF document. What it does do when you do that is that the table of contents that you hopefully created earlier on from those clickable links is actually still clickable. So when you export your PDF and you have a table of contents there, the links can be clicked to allow people to navigate through the document. So when you're sending someone a 20 or a 30-page PDF document, they have a navigable table of contents. Another tip and trick, and this one hasn't been in Word quite so long, is there is a dictation function. Pretty well hidden away, not very obvious. Right across the end of the styles area where I've circled on there is a button that says dictate. If you have a headset, I wouldn't try and do this with a laptop microphone, it doesn't work very well, but if you have a headset and you can talk clearly, then click on dictate. It will give you a drop down to choose the language that you wish to dictate in. From memory, there's obviously definitely English in there. There's a bunch of other languages. I'm just going to have a real quick check now on my screen. Yeah, a bunch of other languages. So we have UK English and US English. There's also Chinese in there. There is Canadian English, French, German, Italian, Spanish, and Spanish Mexico and Spanish Spain. So any of those languages you can dictate into Word. There are also some preview languages for other countries. But if you click there, you can talk and it will type up your document. And it doesn't do a bad job. So actually, it's quite a time saver if you have a long document to type up and you can read it from somewhere else, or you can talk it from memory, you can dictate to Word. And I think this is my last Word tip. Another button that's appeared in the last few years, again, that typically doesn't get spotted. There is an editor button, and this is a bit like Grammarly. If you've come across that as a plugin, the editor function will actually give you suggestions and check boxes or check marks, so ticks for spelling, grammar, conciseness, clarity, all these things. So if you're typing up something long and you want to check that it's good, use the editor function and it will give you some guidance and tips. Basically, it will check your spelling and grammar and make sure that everything's good. And if it's not, it will give you some suggestions that you might want to, for example, shorten some of your words or change the flow of the language. Is it as good as Grammarly? Possibly not, but it's free and it's built into Word, so definitely worth a try if you haven't already used that function. Run it on the document that you're typing, see what it says. So before I go into questions, I'm really going to quickly screen share again. I just want to show you this whole table of contents functionality and features. So let me share across my screen. In the meantime, whilst I'm doing this, if you do have any questions, please do pop them in the chat. So this is my horrendous Word document actually in terms of its formatting, but it is there. Let me get rid of my table of contents and let me switch back to show you just one page. There we go. I'll blow the zoom up a bit as well, make it nice and clear. Here we go. Right. So when you've got this right, one thing Word does have a habit of doing is it does sometimes allow you to select a heading and you'll put it in and it formats it correctly, but actually it doesn't appear in the table of contents because it hasn't, for some reason, picked up the markup quite correctly. When you get it right and you have these headings, you can actually fold them up. So you see as I mouse over them, I've got little arrows. So I can actually fold up, for example, subtopic 1, I can fold subtopic 2. Underneath subtopic 2, I used heading 3, and that's my subtopic, so I can fold that up first as well if I want to. So you can see I can start to collapse my document from the headings. And that's when you know you've got it right. So if you want to create another subtopic, so we've got subtopic, let me just press return, type something else, subtopic 2, highlight that, go up to heading 3, which is the heading I'm using for my subtopics, and you'll see it's giving me the folder. So I know that's working okay. And once you've done heading 3, you can end up with heading 4, and it will let you go. I don't know how deep you can nest the headings. I don't think I've ever gone deeper than a heading 3, but as you use those, it will expand across. Now, if we want to put a table of contents in, I'm going to create a new page. So again, another quick tip, if you weren't aware of this one, hopefully you are if you've used Word for a long time, but Control-Enter will instantly give you a page break. So Control and Enter on the keyboard, page break to a new page, and we're going to put that table of contents in. As I say, it's not under the Insert menu. So you go to Insert, you'll be looking here all day for the table of contents. It's not here. It's under References, Table of Contents. And if we go for Automatic Table 1, there we go. So it's pulled in all of that stuff, and it knows that actually they're all on page 1 because they are. It's not the world's most amazing document. If I break out to another new page here, and I'm going to put it in my heading 3, and you can see it's got something here already, like it thinks there's something here. And this is where Word can be a bit funny. Oops, it's because I've broken it off from topic 2. So let me come down. Let me just do something new. There we go. Right. So it's going to be topic 3. I'm going to highlight that. I'm going to make that heading. What do we do? Heading 1. Okay, so we've got topic 3. As I say, if I go back to, I've created a few new pages. If I go back to my table of contents here, it hasn't updated. So what I have to do now is right click. And you can see from the right click menu, I have update field. And when I update the field, it gives me 2 options. It gives me update page numbers only or update the entire table. If you only choose to update the page numbers, you won't get any new headings that you've added. It will just update the page numbers. So that's kind of useful if you've shuffled things around pages, but most of the time you'll want to update the entire table. I've never noticed it take any longer. So update entire table, and there you go. You can now see topic 3's come into my list. And even on here within Word, you can use Control Click to follow the links. So Control Click will jump you through the pages. But if I export this really rubbish document to a PDF quickly, you'll be able to see that the links are clickable. So I'll create a PDF. There we go. We'll call it "This is my title." That's great. And here's our PDF in Adobe. And as I come down right to the bottom of my table of contents, I can click on those, and you can see it's jumped me to the page of the document or to the subtopic. So kind of handy. You can put those tables of contents in, export the document, and move the data back and forth. So I am going to stop that now. Come back to me. Let me put that presentation back on, get rid of my mug. There we go. So if anybody's got any Q&A, in fact, I haven't updated this slide. It says for help implementing Teams. If you've got any particular questions, please do feel free to pop them in the chat. Otherwise, you can always drop me a line anytime. My email address there is on the screen, craig.atkins@one-fix.com. Hopefully out there you found something that you'll find useful. It's certainly not all power user stuff, but certainly some things there that hopefully will be handy. I've had a message saying thank you very much, useful functionality you hadn't come across before. No problem at all, you're absolutely welcome. I'm glad you found it useful. What I plan to do now is over the probably over the next month or so with some of the next webinars, probably do some deeper dives. So the plan will be to maybe do some advanced Excel specific webinars. I think there's much more actually you can do with Excel. So we'll pull together some really detailed cases and do some deep dives into Excel functionality and what you can do with formulas and that kind of stuff. So do stay tuned to the webinar list. If you have any specific suggestions of things that you would like to see sort of covered off in any of these webinars, do feel free to drop me an email. I'm always happy to take suggestions. It's very difficult to think of new content for every week. So anything you'd like tackled, please do drop me a line. Otherwise, keep an eye on the website, onefix.com. There's an events section there. The next webinar will be listed, be up there tomorrow on Thursday, and you'll be able to sign up for next week. I look forward to seeing you then. Thank you very much for your time, and have a good afternoon. Thanks.